The boat was called Moxie, and it was a 50-foot trimaran, so 3 hulls. It had been built by Walter Green, who's a pretty famous East Coast American multi-hull designer pioneer, if you like. And he had built it for a chap named Phil Weld, who had won the Ostar race from England to America in 1980. And this was a big deal because it was the first multi-hull ever to win a race. It was the first sort of multi-hull to really enter a race successfully and get to the other side. And of course he was American, shock horror. He was not French, and the French hated it. So inside this boat there was just a sort of, you could stand up, which was great. And then to either side there was a bunk. Then there was a huge bulkhead, with some storage in it. The bunk that I described going down that armour, and then a forepeak. And 20 years down the line, of course, the boat had had holes cut out here for more storage. They had almost made a double bunk in the forward area. It had had several owners before this one. So when the boat cracked, it failed between the main hull and the beam, the front beam to the port side. And it was purely because somebody had cut into a structural component in order to add more storage space, and there were a couple of pairs of Craig's jeans there, which obviously got pretty wet in the process. So the boat wasn't going to fall apart, but it was undermined, and more seriously, potentially it could become worse. The very attractive surfing Californian, fortunately, was a boat builder, so he did a great job of sort of stuffing the area full of bits of wood and fabric soaked in resin. So, it wasn't really going to get much worse, but, what did I know? Especially, what did I know about boat building? So off we set on this boat, and now we get this terrible news that there's this huge whopper of a storm chasing us down. And the first night that we became aware of this, we were diving south as fast as we could, but very quickly the wind just died. Just turned into a mill pond, and blazing sunset. Fantastic rouges, just really just on fire. The night was on fire, and then the waves came, and the waves built up. Still no wind, and these just huge rollers that are creeping in. And that this thing is coming to get you. And then comes the rain. Just torrential rain, just pouring, bucketing down. And you were sitting there huddled, and Miles has the remote control for the autopilot in his pocket. And if you lift up your hand, you get this bubble of water. It was just so much water raining down on us. And you go down below, and even you could be wearing, it doesn't matter what you'd be wearing, clothes are just pasted to you. And then that cleared. And behind it were these clouds, still no wind, these sort of cloud rims, they look like squall lines, and they're very, you're very afraid of them. And we already had virtually no sail up at this point. We were expecting, bad things to happen. And so I'm off watch at this point. I go down below, and I wake up, 2:00 in the morning. And I realise very quickly that the atmosphere around me is totally surreal. It's like the boat is hovering. You can't feel the waves, you can't hear anything, it just seems to be caught in this outer space kind of scenario. And I see Craig, who's the skipper of the boat, and he's sitting in the corner just inside the cabin, and he's rolling cigarettes, for his country. He's rolling with a fury, and he's lighting them and passing them to Chris, as if he's feeding the helmsman with nicotine. And Miles, the good-looking Californian guy, is asleep, but he's not. It's quite clear that he's in denial. He doesn't want to show any signs of being awake, because then he might have to be involved with whatever this strange thing is going on. So I get dressed and I go on deck. And Chris, who's a big chap, he's a well-built guy, and he's holding the helm, and he's holding it like this, and he's like, can't take it anymore. My arms are burning. Somebody else. And I look out behind the boat. And these amazing waves just look right up. It's very hard to gauge how big the waves are, but my guess at the time was they were a good halfway up the mast in height. And they're really quite beautiful. They're these jade and these white swills, and then they're loud and they're roaring, and then they're starting to crumble and crash, and then they're coming down, and then the boat goes surges right forward with these waves. My face now being in the wind, as the wave goes down, we're up on the crest, and my hair is just going, and you can't hear anything. It's just caught up in this wind. And then turning away from it, of course, the hair goes all over the place here. And I'm looking at these wind displays, and one's on true wind and one's on apparent wind, and it's 65 knots, And on the other one, it says 72, and I'm just going 68, 79, I'm just getting caught up in these little number game here. And then I realised, of course, this is serious, and there's stuff going on here, and never mind the numbers. And I turn back to the others, and we actually don't have any sails up at all. And according to the displays, we're doing about 19 and a half knots. Actually really out of control. So Craig now wants to set up a drogue. We've got large amounts of line, and they're stringing anchor chain together, and I'm holding on to him, as he tells me, who's holding on to Chris. We're like this chain of people because none of us want to die, really. And they go, well, what can we put on it? And I go, because we don't have a drogue. I'm thinking, quite laterally here. And I had stolen, let's be frank, a milk crate as we left, because we had all these winch handles and blocks and stuff for the cockpit. And it was perfect size, just fit right in. Anyway, that was going to be a good drogue. So we strung that through the chain. There was a milk crate through the chain. Toss the whole lot over the back, and it feeds out into the water. And lo and behold, speed drops down to about 9 knots. And at this point, Chris just has to take a break, and he thrusts the helm upon me. I don't care, what do I know? And I'm thinking temporarily I will be driving. I really didn't think these guys trusted me. I didn't show exactly a huge breadth of knowledge about sailing, but I'm driving, and that seems to be fine with everybody else at this point. And then Craig is right by my face, and he's giving me instructions on how to drive the boat in these seas. Well, he starts off by saying, our lives are in your hands, and then really just doesn't say anything else. And I realised quite very immediately that the key to getting the boat into the next wave crest is to centre the hulls, and then the huge propulsion begins, and you're just spat forward on this wave. And then Craig's back there again, and he's like, it's critical that you don't plough into the next wave, or we could lose the mast. It's like, okay. So now we turn up over the next wave, and then we're going down again. We centre the hulls and the 3 sterns, and away we go again. And this goes, I have never concentrated more in my life. And my gauge on whether we were in the right place in that wave was keeping the wind on my left butt cheek. You could feel the wind through really everything you had on. But if as long as the wind and that angle was on my left butt cheek, then everything seemed to be okay. So, I would steer up and down these next waves. And I had no concept of time, no concept of how long this had been going on until the light broke. It was morning. I must have been doing that for about 5 hours. And I assume pretty successfully, or somebody would have interrupted me. But my concentration was so immense that I had no perception outside at each wave, at each moment, and getting over it alive. So we get through that night, and now Miles is up, and he's ready to relieve me. And I'm really, really hungry. I must have burnt through with the adrenaline, or every reserve that I had. And so I'm making some porridge, which obviously nobody else wants because they feel slightly sick. Anyway, we survive. We've got a broken boat, and we're limping into the Azores. And that's really the next chapter of my life. There's a photo that Miles took in black and white of the 3 of us, post-traumatic experience, I think. And, our faces really say it all. And we must have looked so terrible that the harbour master actually packed us into his car and drove us to the hotel, which I thought was pretty unusual. And we check into the hotel, and the lady goes, yeah, not many people come here in November, and we have a lovely room for you with the view of the sea. And we all visibly reel back in horror. And we're going, no, we don't want a view of the sea. And the woman was a delight, and she actually gave us the perfect view. You opened the patio doors, and there was a concrete wall, with a bit of grass in between it. We had the view of the wall. And every night we would sit and enjoy the view of the wall.